The first keynote speaker is Mr. Mike Wallace, lecturer at the Budapest Business and Metropolitan University on health and wellness tourism and spa management.
Thank you. That was very nicely introduced. Can I have the little black... I'll just move the microphone a bit down. I don't have the Serbian height, I'm afraid. It's really good to be here. It's a hybrid forum, so there are people online and there are people here in reality. And actually, this is the first time I've presented live, I think, in 2 years, apart from my teaching. So it's a real pleasure to be in a live environment again. As was announced, I've spent about 28 years in the health and wellness industry. I now teach and I lecture. I also write books. Whoops, here we go. So I write books. I want to promote the book, not because I want to make money. I don't make much money off this book, but I know that we've got some people here in the audience that are studying spa tourism, and everything I learnt in the spa industry is in this book. So it is worth purchasing if you're studying the subject. Okay. So I think I showed this slide the last time I was here. When we think of wellness, these are the sorts of images that we have. Beautiful girl in jacuzzi, diet, massage, fitness. Today, my message is that wellness is far more complex than this. It's far more complicated in light also of the pandemic and all the challenges that are facing us in today's world. And these are some of the old definitions: optimal well-being, active process, holistic. These definitions, I feel, are becoming out of date. As I said before, the pandemic and the challenges that are facing us in today's world have changed our perception of wellness. So I want to talk a little bit about where wellness came from. And I'll be talking about 10 minutes about the influences. The Paleolithic era. The anthropologists actually think we lived a lot longer than they originally presumed. Why? Plant-based diet, lots of variety in our food. We also had times where we actually didn't eat much at all. So it was like a natural form of intermittent fasting. Moving, we were continually moving. Bare feet, good for our strength and coordination. We were out in the sunlight. That meant we got vitamin D, good for our bones, our immune system. We washed in cold water, again, good for our immune system. And we lived in circles of about 50 people, which apparently is ideal from a social wellness perspective. And then we have the influence of the religions, particularly the ancient religions. Hinduism, karma, the law of cause and effect. What we do now will influence our future life, our future lives, but also our existing life as well. Every action has an equal reaction. This comes from Hinduism, Ayurveda, yoga, Buddhism, mindfulness, meditation, the Abrahamic religions. Our body and our health are gifts from God. So we need to avoid behaviors that can harm our mind, body, and spirit. And then we have Taoism, which is connected to China, which is a belief in nature and also the universal force of qi. And then we have the Greeks. The Greeks were kind of interesting. They divided happiness into 2 categories. Hedonic happiness, that's basically about indulging in behaviors which can possibly cause us harm and not really thinking about the consequence of those behaviors that give us pleasure. And that eudaimonic happiness, which is more concerned with personal growth and meaningful behavior. And this is what brings us happiness in the long term. And Stoicism. Stoicism is about accepting the moment that you are in, living in the moment, and not getting caught up in the past and the future, but living in the moment, accepting it, and looking at it objectively. And then we all know about the Romans. The reason why they could build such fantastic, huge bathhouses is because they learned how to utilize concrete. That meant they could build huge aqueducts, like you can see in the picture, and they could transport water, and they really started the spa bathing culture. So I'm going to jump 2,000 years to the age of enlightenment in the 18th century. The reason why this was important, this was when we put logic and reason over superstition. So what did that mean? It meant that in order for something to be believed, for something to be valid, it meant that it had to be proved. There had to be evidence behind it. And because of this, there were huge developments in science and in health and in hygiene as well. And then we have the 19th century. This is really when the spa and wellness concept, as we know it, took off. Certain people, Preisnitz, he cured a lot of people, mainly unhealthy, wealthy older people. He took them into the mountains, gave them a healthy diet, gave them lots of exercise, and gave them cold water showers. Kneipp, he took on this concept. He was a German priest, and he combined hot and cold water bathing. When you go from heat to cold, as you know from when you jump from a sauna into a cold pool, you get a tingling feeling. And that tingling feeling is your blood circulation being stimulated. It also stimulates the immune system. Brenner, he introduced the detox cure. And that is where we get this from, muesli. This was about the turn of the 19th century. And finally, we have Per Henrik Ling. He introduced in Stockholm his gymnastic institute, really the first form of fitness. So now we have the 19th century, which is when really the spa tourism took off. And basically, the aristocracy and wealthy people went to spa resorts for both recreation, but also for cure. And spas were a little bit naughty. They said at that time they could cure all diseases. So they said they could cure everything from even tuberculosis to sexually transmitted diseases, which of course they couldn't. In the background to this, in America, interesting things were happening. Writers and philosophers in America came up with a concept called transcendentalism. This was a personal connection with God. It believed that men were essentially good and that you had to listen to your intuition. There was theosophy. These were writers and also philosophers who believed that you could contact God and reality through the power of your thoughts. Meditation was part of this. And then we have the hocus pocus. Also in the 19th century, they believed in the occult, in spiritualism, which was talking to the dead, and hypnosis, but they call it mesmerizing. And this was very popular. And out of that came the New Thought movement, which is very interesting. This is the law of attraction. What you believe now will manifest itself in the future. This comes from the 19th century, and there's a very famous book called The Secret. I'm sure it's translated into Serbian. It comes from this 19th century New Thought movement. Believe it, visualize it, and it will happen. This is a very strong part of the wellness movement. And then we have lots of other self-help books. This was the first one. It was called Self-Help, and it was written by a man called Samuel Smiles. It was for poor people, and it told poor people they could get out of poverty if they worked hard, educated themselves, and took responsibility. So very capitalist. Likewise, the book Think Rich and Grow Rich, this was published in the 1930s. And these are all best-selling books today. So at the beginning of the 20th century, life expectancy was about 50, in the 50s. From 1945, this changed dramatically. And the reason was because of diet, improvements in lifestyle, and also antibiotics. And this is when the World Health Organization, they changed their concept of health, not just from being free of disease, but complete mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. Also a little bit later came the pill, which meant that women could take control of their bodies. They could be more independent, and this also improved their health as well. In the 1950s, we had this gentleman, Dr. Halbert Dunn. He was the man that invented wellness. Wellness comes from him. He was a doctor, he traveled around America, and he wrote the book High Level Wellness. But the book was very heavy, and it didn't really take on. It wasn't so successful. And then we have the hippie movement. This was in the 60s and 70s when young people, they rejected conservative traditional lifestyles. They packed up and they went to cities like San Francisco, and there they lived in communes. They took hallucinogenic drugs, marijuana, and they also traveled to places like India and Thailand, and they brought back with them Buddhism and Hinduism, and they mixed it up with astrology, tarot card reading, crystals, and these influences are still in the wellness industry today. It was in this era, in the 1970s, this man here, John Travis, he took Halbert Dunn's principle of wellness and he put it into a logical, easy way for ordinary people to understand. So as you can see, you've got illness on one side, wellness on the other, and you reach a wellness lifestyle through awareness, education, and growth. So he was the one that really made wellness accessible. And he put these into what he called his wellness wheel. And you can see the wellness wheel on the left. That was his original wellness wheel. This has changed. Over the last few decades, this has become far more complex, particularly, as I said, after the pandemic. So what I would like to do for the remaining part of my presentation is just go through this wellness wheel and talk about how all the different aspects have changed. Okay. So the first one we have is emotional wellness. This is interesting. I'm writing a book about this at the moment, and one of the things I'm arguing is that actually emotional wellness shouldn't actually be in the wellness wheel. Why not? Emotions are a chemical reaction as to what is happening in all the other dimensions, in all the areas of our life. They're like the dashboard on your car. So all emotions are a reaction. So I argue that really it shouldn't be a definition in its own right. So this is very interesting. This is from my book, The Spa Manager's Essential Guide. We feel our emotions generally here in our body. And the self-help movements say that you can control your emotions through the power of your thoughts. That's very simplistic. Our emotions are also affected by our environment and by our relationships and where we work. And we can also change our emotions very, very quickly. And we can do that through the habits that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. Smoking, having a drink. But unfortunately, these habits on the left-hand side of the screen, although they change our emotions instantly, can cause us harm in the long term. So one of the challenges we have with our emotional wellness is to really focus on those behaviors and aspects of wellness that bring us not immediate emotional change, but long-term happiness. For example, going to the fitness, you don't get immediate emotional change. That comes over a period of time. So the challenge in this digital age is minimizing or being aware of those behaviors, which in moderation are probably okay, but not letting them take over our lives. Mental wellness. I argue that mental wellness shouldn't be outside the wellness circle. It should be right in the middle. Why? Because at some point, we will lose our physical health. We'll probably lose some of our relationships. We'll definitely, probably in our lifetime, lose a workplace. So we need to have good mental wellness to be resilient enough to cope with these changes. And actually, the most important things we can do for our brain health, apart from meditation and awareness and mindfulness, according to the science, is actually cardio exercise. Cardio exercise is the best thing you can do for your brain. Spiritual wellness. People that have spirituality in their lives, according to all the academic studies, live longer and are much happier. They live longer and they're happier. And what is interesting, the number of religious people in the world is increasing. But that's only because of population growth. There are more and more people defining themselves as spiritual as opposed to religious. In other words, they believe in something, but they don't necessarily believe in a traditional religion. We know about the main aspects of physical wellness. We know we should exercise. But sitting in an office all day, doing nothing, and then going to the fitness and doing intense workouts 3 times a week is actually not particularly good for us. We know that certain foods, if we eat too much of them, may cause cancer, too much red meat, too much processed meat. Veganism is a huge trend at the moment, not just because of health reasons, but also because of the environment as well. But there's one aspect of physical health that they say now is the most important, and it's this. It's sleep. Of all the physical wellness components, sleep and rest is the most important aspect, they say. We need 7 to 9 hours sleep a night. If we don't get regular and good quality sleep, we're more at risk of stroke, heart disease, and Alzheimer's. And the World Health Organization, they've now classified night shift working as a carcinogen. That means if you work night shifts, you're more likely to get cancer. So of all the physical dimensions, sleep apparently is the most important. We know about the environment. We know that we have a sick environment. We know that one of the reasons the pandemic happened was because we didn't look after our environment. But I want to talk about the environment from a micro-environmental perspective. Just look at the house at the top of the picture. Much easier to live a wellness lifestyle in that house than the apartment at the bottom of the picture. It doesn't matter how much meditation you do and how many massages you go to. If you're living in an apartment at the bottom, very difficult to have a wellness lifestyle. But you can also be living in the house at the top and have a life of hell if you can't manage your relationships, if you can't manage your health, if you can't manage your finances. So our micro environmental wellness is really important, not just the physical, but the non-physical environment that we're in as well. Social wellness, this is really, really interesting. Like spiritual wellness, social contact is essential to our health, and it also influences the length of our life as well. But it's not necessarily the depth of the social contact. Even short, superficial, but regular interactions are good for us as well. And this has been thrown into chaos through digital technology. And the results of how we interact digitally are not really yet known. And very interesting, there's one thing that has changed human behavior globally more than anything else in the history of our evolution. And if this was an interactive class, I would ask people what they think, and they never get the answer. One thing that has changed human behavior globally more than anything else in the whole of human history, and it's this: pornography. Our attitude to sex, how we make sexual contact, our sexual health, and what we do in our sexual activity has been influenced by pornography on the internet, globally. I'm not judging it, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, but it's completely changed sexual behavior. 100 years ago, nobody knew what anyone else was doing in the bedroom. Now we know everything, and actually people are learning what to do from the internet. Very quickly, this is a really important and interesting exercise or description. If we don't have successful social relationships, this can bring us immense pain into our lives. And most people don't know how to manage their relationships. So we have different circles. I call these boundaries, if I can get the clicker to work. Yeah, it's slowly coming up. Here we go. It's important that we manage our relationships. So we should have a circle for work colleagues, a circle for friends, closer friends, intimate partner. The problem is when we are not conscious of these boundaries, where we don't keep these boundaries clear. And we also might have people in our inner circles that cause us pain. For instance, I've got a very good friend, but they are quite dramatic and they occasionally cause a lot of problems. So what you can do is this. You can have people in your close circle, but you can also put them in another box where you are always slightly cautious of how you handle them. So this is just one exercise, but how we manage our relationships is absolutely key to our happiness and our overall wellness. So's this. I hate to tell the students here, and actually half the people in the room here, but there's not going to be enough money for your retirement when you get older. I put the Dalai Lama up there, and he's not the only spiritual leader, but he says in order to be happy, you need to have your basic material needs met. You need to have a certain amount of money coming in to be able to support yourself. So learning how to manage our finances is also key in terms of wellness. And it's actually very simple. You basically need to have more money coming in than the money that's going out. But even the most intelligent people sometimes don't realize this. Okay. All right. This is also really important. My father worked in a job. I think he changed his job once, actually. So he had 2 jobs in his entire career. Then he changed his job. I've changed my career 5 times. Actor, fitness instructor, manager, teacher, and now I paint pictures. Losing your job is one of the most stressful life events that you can encounter. They say it's as stressful as a death. The next generation are even going to have to change their jobs and their careers more times. In fact, I was talking to a friend and they were saying there isn't going to be secure jobs. They're more likely to be projects where you jump from one project to the next project. So in order to cope with that, you will need resilience, you'll need flexibility. There's also the culture that we work in. When they talk about workplace wellness, they generally talk about the building, making the building green, making the building have a beautiful design. The building doesn't matter if the work culture in there is toxic. If there's bad energy in the workplace, it doesn't matter how beautiful the building is in. So part of workplace wellness in the future is about the culture that is built in the workplace. And information technology is also disrupting this. The balance between work time and leisure time is now confused. And I think actually it's Portugal who have brought in laws to try and clarify this. They are the first country, as I know. And we have this. This is very interesting. The hocus pocus, the strange diets, people treating wellness like a religion. I used to work in a fitness club, and the men would come in and spend hours lifting weights. And I used to say to them, don't come to the gym, go read a book, do something for up here. Anorexia, crazy diets. There was the conspiracy theory that Bill Gates was using the vaccine to put chips in people's arm. Politicians cutting up babies and eating them in pizza restaurants in America. This didn't come from gossip in bars. This came from yoga, middle-class, educated wellness centers in America and in Australia. So we need to be really careful. There's a lot of hocus pocus out there, and I'm very pragmatic. I like wellness to have evidence behind it, and I think this is something that Natasha was mentioning as well. So beware of this. We call it wellness fascism, or the dark side of wellness. So, I'm just promoting myself again. These are some of my paintings. So I'm trying to move from teacher now to artist. But I put a quote up there. If you want to contact me, please do so through LinkedIn. My Facebook tends to be a private space. I've also got my website and my art website there. But before I finish, I would just like to summarize. Wellness is complex, far more complex than it ever was. It's not a religion. It's a support mechanism so that we can live a happy and healthy life. Mental wellness is absolutely essential to our health. Mindfulness, living in the moment, sleep, cardio exercise. These are tools we can use to strengthen our mental wellness. And then be careful of the hocus pocus. There's a lot of it out there. Therapies, diets, and so forth. Look for the evidence in the wellness industry. I think I'm rounding up now, so thank you very much. If anyone's got any questions. It was a lot of information in one half an hour or 20-minute speech, but I hope it was interesting for you. Any questions? Anyone on Zoom? I can't see anyone on Zoom. Yes. It's like a cloud out.
It seems that wellness is too complex.
Any of the students want to ask any questions? Okay, I've spoken too much then.
Okay, I would like to ask you something about living in present moment. It's also a very popular concept.
It is, and it comes from, it's basically a Buddhist concept, but there's a writer called Eckhart Tolle. He's very famous. He wrote The Power of Now. And if you want to know more about that, I would recommend reading the book, because he explains it far more professionally than me. He's the expert in the now.
But many people say like it's very difficult to live in the present moment, because they are connected with the past most of time. And they are worried about the future. How to be present?
I can tell you, I never understood it. And I read the book and I was going to myself, I need to live in the present moment. I need to live in the present moment. It wasn't working. And then I read Oprah Winfrey's book. Okay. And she says, it's very simple. Whatever you are doing in this exact moment, do it the best you can. So if you're listening to a lecture, give it 100%. If you're gossiping with your girlfriend or boyfriend, gossip 100%. So put whatever you are doing in that moment, be in it, and put your whole heart into it. And I think that's explained beautifully.
Yes, yeah. Just to focus.
To focus and also put your heart into that moment. Yeah. And there are lots of arguments about the future. Some scientists say that the past and future are actually illusions. They don't exist at all. Yes. But then you can start really messing up your mind if you think about that too much.
Thank you, mate.
Okay. That's enough?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.